Item 13 on the agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezone petition from AG to LI for the I-94 Industrial Park, Second Edition, generally described in the northeast quarter of Section 6 Township, 139 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party asking for this rezone, please come forward.
Thank you. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying, representing the owner of I-94 Industrial Park. I believe this will be, there's a correction to make. This says second edition. I believe this is the third edition. I believe there currently is a second edition in place, so that's just one correction there. Looking at expanding I-94 Industrial Park to the east, this property is between I-94 and Highway 10. Just looking at adding some limited industrial area out there. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Shank at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition, please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the public wish to make comment? Feel free to come forward. Any commissioners wish to make comment on this? Being none, I'll ask Mr. Corton to make a recommendation.
Based upon the existing industrial to the west of it, this seems like a natural progression for industrial. Staff has no reservations of recommended approval for the rezone petition. We have, with the subsequent plat of that, we do have conditions, and we would ask that those would be attached as part of the approval if you so choose. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Corton. This time I'll close public portion of this hearing and ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the City Dickinson Planning and Zoning Committee recommend approval for rezone from Ag to LI for I-94 Industrial Park 2 addition as depicted in the application materials as meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg. Is there a second to this motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Been a second? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend rezone. Time we have item 14, it's a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for I-94 of Industrial Park, and we'll correct that, it'll be third edition. Generally described in the northeast quarter of Section 6 Township, 139 North, Range 96 West. Party would please come forward.
Again, I'm Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying. The plan here is to subdivide this area into 10 lots. The total acreage is 16.79 acres. There will be a 60-foot dedicated right-of-way through the center of this site that will connect to the street to the west, which will require a replat of lot 38 on the south side of the property there. This street will be paved as the city had requested. Again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now, you said how many acres this is actually involving?
16.79.
Okay. It was initially put in as 20.85 acres.
That's a different subdivision. That's for Medora Meadows. I had noticed the applications were
Okay.
mixed around. The names were switched around. So
16.79.
16.79.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I believe there was a discrepancy there that the names were wrong.
Okay.
For some
No,
things, so.
wanted to clarify that. Any questions at this time from Mr. Shank?
Mr. Chairman, I could just add the conditions of approval. I haven't had a chance to get those. I normally, unfortunately, just the way life is, doing them 1 or 2 days before the meeting, just so he's aware of it and the applicant as well. And I'll read those. There's only 4 of them. Prior to final plat approval, a detailed stormwater management plan should be approved by the city. We're requiring that irrespective of any existing subdivision. If they have that, all new ones need to have that to address the stormwater issues. Prior to issuance of any building permit, the road design shall be approved and paved to the satisfaction of the city engineer. With that, I didn't put the county road supervisor, but that's natural coordination with them, is that we have that, and that's consistent with what we've done this morning, what we've done in the past. Prior to final plat approval, the property shall be rezoned from ag to light industrial, as we've already done. And then prior to final plat approval, the road should be designed to meet adequate emergency vehicle turnaround in and around the terminus of the road to the satisfaction of the city engineer and the fire department. Since this road just more or less stops, we want to make sure that the temporary turnaround or redesign of that road at the terminus so that the emergency vehicles can turn around if that's the case, because you're going down a narrow strip of road for more than 300 feet.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. And were you aware of all those, Mr. Shank?
I am now.
Thank you. Any other questions or comment for Mr. Shank?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in public who would like to make comment on this plat, please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the public wish to make comment, please feel free to come forward. Being none, are there any comments from the commission? This time we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkins.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for I-94 Industrial Park, second edition, as depicted in the application materials, as meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, along with the 4 conditions that are depicted in our materials.
Thank you, Mr. Elkins. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Kovash. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend to approve the plat. Thank you very much. Item 15, we have a final plat. It's to consider a final plat for Lyons Second Subdivision, generally described as a replat of all of Lyons Subdivision and all of lots 1 through 3 and part of Lot 4, Block 3, North Industries First Edition, situated in the west half of the northeast quarter of Section 27, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. And Mr. Tooze, are you going to abstain from this one? Okay, Mr. Tooze has let us know in advance that he had an interest in this and would abstain. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'll be passing around, I noticed in your packet, you were distributed an old version of the final plat that did not reflect those changes that Commissioner Jackson had raised at the last meeting, so I'll go ahead and pass that around.
Thank you.
As that makes its way around, I'll note for you the changes that are on this version that were raised at the last meeting. The first comment is on 40th Street East, on the north edge of the platted area. There was a request to dedicate a small strip of land. As that strip continues to the south, there was a request to describe 4 separate tracts of land that could be either dedicated or sold to adjacent owners to the west. So we have done that, which kind of cleaned up the access easement issue which previously existed. The next item is, at the last meeting, we were requested within Block 1 to provide rear yard easements for utilities and drainage. In between lots 7 and 8 of Block 1, we were requested to add a drainage easement for storm sewer pipe to continue south. We have also done that. And the last item which was requested is the area east of the platted premise. Previously reflected that it was an unplatted tract. Commissioner Jackson did note, and we confirmed that in fact that was part of the Sally subdivision, Lot 1, Block 1. So those changes have all been noted on this final plat. One last item to bring to your attention is that we've had conversations with your fire chief, and just for you to be aware that we will continue to coordinate with staff and the fire chief to make sure that as development occurs in this area, that fire and refuse continue to have appropriate access for their means, and that'll all be part of the building permit process and the PUD that was approved by your city commission on this past Monday, 2 days ago. So with that, glad to address any questions or concerns that you may have.
This time, does anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Soren, all these changes and were at request of engineering?
We just, I think we addressed all the changes on here except you've got the 15-foot drainage easement between lots 7 and 8. I think our intent was for water and sewer to extend through there for future development to the north if need be. Probably looking at a minimum of a 20-foot easement in there so we could facilitate that if need be to the north.
One other item to note that I noticed this morning, which is on the rear yard of Lot 1, it's listed as a 10-foot drainage easement. It would actually be a drainage and utility easement. So there's one other very minor correction that can easily be remedied at the same time as granting the 20-foot between lots 7 and 8.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jackson?
I think we'd also asked for a full street width in the southeast corner there. I see Mr. Corton has it in the conditions of the approval. Is that correct?
Condition 2 of that follows along with what we had for the preliminary of that, and I'll leave that up to. What I want to make sure is that there's sufficient turnaround, and then the access to 7th Street is secured one way or the other, either with the adjoining property of getting 33 feet or providing 66-foot dedication. I've left that up to the city engineer and the fire chief to determine that, which way they want to go with respect to the applicant. I know they've had some discussions, and I just left that condition with respect to that, and we'll finalize that before they move forward.
The only other thing I'd add, Mr. Chairman, I think the intent was to add the utility easements of the rear lot lines, but then remove them in the front lot lines. Correct?
That would normally be the case. The problem is going to be is by the time that you consult with the utility providers, determining when that will be. We can come through, they could come back, and if the utility providers on this one would be Rough Rider, I presume, if they are in agreement that the rear can come, then they could just come back for an easement vacation all along that area, and we could resolve it that way. It would be preferable to have this taken care of, and I don't know if Jeff has had discussions with them to see where their direction is with respect to the utilities.
To the city planner's comments, we've provided them in the front and rear to provide the opportunity and flexibility for the utilities. Perhaps there would be telephone in one and electric in another. We're fine dedicating and not asking for a vacation of those easements. In fact, most areas which we would plat, we would do front and rear yard easements. So unless there's a specific objection to those utilities having additional easement areas, with respect to the commissioner's comment about the fire access, we took it just as was described, which is to work with the fire chief and city engineer on the design of that T intersection We do, since we've started this process, we do have the abutting property to the south under contract to purchase this year. We have designed that, and the other half of the right-of-way is actually represented in that new area. So as part of that, we could grant, as part of the plat, access easement, that other 33 feet, along with the other easements which will be necessary for the water and sewer extension from the south.
Thank you. Is there any problem with the showing the utilities easements on both front and back? Is that any engineering problem? Or is it just
Well,
a description
I
problem?
wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think it's not a problem on our side. I think if you ask the utility companies what they want, Rough Rider wants them in the front. They've made it known that that's where they want their easements to be. I think our discussion at the last meeting was, do we want to push them a little bit and force them to the rear yards and not have pedestals sitting in the front yards of these homes? I think if we're going to give them their choice, and that's probably why they were put up front to begin with, they're going to want them in the front. And I don't want to put words in Mr. Jackson's mouth, so to speak, but I believe that was the discussion we had, is are we going to push their hands and take the easements away from them and force them in the rear yard?
I'd like your comment on that. Mr. Jackson, I know we've talked about that. If we don't want them in the front, then they shouldn't be shown as depicted, as being approved in the front.
Well, I'd prefer they're not in the front. I think it's just a better-looking neighborhood without them in the front. And I would hope that we could sit down with Rough Rider Electric in a community-minded way and get their cooperation with that. So I'd like to see it removed. We had the same thing, I think, on the Sundance plats, which were only preliminary plats, but I'd like to see us remove them and work with Rough Rider in that regard.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make a comment on this, please feel free to come forward. Anyone wishing to make comment on the final plat, Lyons Second Subdivision? Feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make comment? Mr. Corton, would you like to make comment on a recommendation on this one?
Mr. Chairman, city staff will recommend approval based upon the two recommended conditions.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Being none, we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the final plat, Lyons Second Subdivision, as depicted in the application materials, meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. The following additional requirements, and that would be the two listed, and I'd like to add the third one, that the utility easement in the front lot lines be removed.
Thank you. Is there a second? There's been a second by Mr. Elkins. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg.
we talked about increasing the easement width from 15 to 20 feet between lot 7 and 8. Do we want that included?
Was that one of the two conditions
No, I think
that
that was
you
a
wanted?
addition.
It's not, but I'd be fine. I don't know, is 20 feet enough for water and sewer? I would say, let's add the condition that the utility easement shown be widened and properly labeled according to staff's direction.
Fine. Is that fine with this motion?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. This time we have a rezone petition. That's Rezone petition, to consider a rezone petition from AG to CC for Medora Meadows, generally described in the northeast quarter, section 32, township 140 north, range 96 west. This time I'd ask the party asking for the rezone, please come forward.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying. Medora Meadows subdivision, we're looking at rezone, and it's going to actually be R3 as well as CC. As shown by the rendering here, the northern portion there where the apartments and housing are shown, that's requested to be R3. And the southern portion there, they're looking at a CC at the request of city staff. And this is the 20.85 acre site that we had talked about earlier. If I may, I'd like to invite the owner who is with us today, Tim Gardner, to come up and just discuss a little bit about their building plan for the site.
Good morning, I'm Tim Gardner. I'm with a principal with Mather Capital out of Sun Valley, Idaho. I'm an avid pheasant hunter. I am an owner and operator of apartments. I have family in North Dakota, and I can't wait to be one of your neighbors if I am so lucky. For the record, my firm has been in business for 25 years. We are not land developers. We are not merchant builders. We are owners and operators of apartments, and that is what we do. And we're looking very favorably upon this market, and we expect that if we are lucky enough to be able to build our project here, we'll be here for an extended time. Basically, I have had several discussions with Mr. Corton so far. He's very prescient in his outlook that once we get some roofs built along the State Street corridor on the west side of the, or State Avenue corridor on the west side, that we will need some undetermined as of yet community commercial services, and he has requested that we extend 15th Street, and to accommodate his request for the prospect of commercial services, we're asking for community commercial on the south side of the development. We're looking to do a relatively dense apartment project. The apartment project that we're envisioning here is of institutional quality, fully amenitized. And when I say fully amenitized, our motto is country club living, regardless of where we are. And the country club living would be with a clubhouse, swimming pool, small park, garages. First phases we're anticipating will be a 3-story walk-up, fairly traditional apartment product. I'd like to, do you mind passing those along? To be perfectly candid, what we have discussed with Mr. Corton is the first phase to be of a modular product. Construction cycle is quicker, gives us then a staging cycle for phase 2, which has never been tried in the state of North Dakota, and I'd like to pass this around. Being owners, operators, we're looking for the next part of the cycle once we get beyond what we call workforce housing. In the next part of the cycle, we will be addressing with what we call the big house concept, which has been utilized in a variety of other markets throughout the country. The big house concept was originally put together by Humphreys Architects out of Dallas. It was to bat the NIMBY influences in a lot of the major metropolitan markets, NIMBY meaning not in my backyard. The idea was to make the apartment product look as much like a high-end single-family residence as possible. What we are proposing in our master plan are phase 2 or 3 being a big house concept. Looks like a high-end residential. The exterior finishes will be somewhat changed from what's on this particular handout that I'm giving. But the beauty I see it as an owner-operator here long haul is that when mom and the kids show up, they can drive into the garage, they can get out, they can get their groceries, they can go into their house directly, which adds a security component. And then I have a cousin or two in Jamestown, and they've told me about the legendary bad winters here. I think it's going to add an element of security, and I think it's honestly a better mousetrap than most of the apartment product I've seen in the greater North Dakota area, and I think the reception is going to be good. And since we're here to own this long haul, I want to have the better mousetrap moving forward. And by doing the modular component on Phase 1, it gives me a quicker construction cycle, and it gives me a place to phase the second or third phase in by having housing for my workers. I would like to pass these along as well, which is just a quick idea of our master plan. I've had several meetings with Mr. Corton. Obviously, this is not set in cement as of yet. I'm meeting with Mr. Soren tomorrow to discuss our plan, and we're very excited to be here, and I hope you will share our enthusiasm for what we're trying to do.
At this time, does anyone have any questions? Any comments?
Mr.
Corton? Oh, Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
Mr. Gardner, I think you said you were requesting community commercial south of 15th. The maps show north.
Excuse me, on both sides. That was, I meant to say south of our multifamily component.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions at this time? At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone request, please come forward and state what you'd like to state. If not, anyone from the commission wish to make comment?
Mr. Chairman, a question for Mr. Corton. The last couple of R3 type of developments now we've done as a PUD, not this one?
This project has been one, with respect to your question, Commissioner Jackson, one that we included within that original total. It's just that this project has taken some time to get to this point. So I did not tell them that they need to go through the PUD process. I said we had already factored that in with the original totals.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kovacs.
is this annexed, or is it proposed to be annexed in, or is it already in?
This property is the same with other properties that we've had, the S&B to the north and the rest that are going through the annexation as we speak. That final deposition of that will be July 10th for all these properties.
So to get it correct, I want to just get the verbiage correct on the zoning request change on all of this particular property that's described here. We're going from ag to an R.
Going from ag to, R3, and a portion is depicted on the map for community commercial.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Kovacs, do you have any interest in this? I have a question for you about the parks on this or not.
Well, that was my question to Mr. Colling. At this point, no, but obviously when it becomes annexed, yes. I think this is just the rezone for right now, is it not? I think the next is a
Right.
preliminary.
Yep.
That was going to be my comment when we got to that obviously right now, no, but it's likely going to be, if it's approved, it's going to be approved before the final will come, so it will play a part in the Park District, which we haven't met with them, as far as I know, yet.
We did actually discuss this one at the meeting.
Did we?
Yeah.
Did it have a different name, maybe?
It might have. It was one that was unnamed, I believe, at the time.
Okay,
So- But we did
that's
discuss this
why.
one, and Cashel was determined to be
Okay,
accepted. So-
sounds good.
Correct.
So with, for Mr. Gardner, so with approval, at what point in time would you start building?
Well, We had hoped to get starting this summer, but my discussions with the city planner told me it could take up to 5 months to get final plat approval, which put me behind the 8 ball. I'd love to be moving dirt late fall. I think it would depend on whether we could go vertical, how bad the winter is. I would, at the worst-case analysis, I want to be going by next spring.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission? If being none, we'll close public portion of this, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the City Dickinson Planning and Zoning Committee recommend approval of the rezone from Ag to CC and R3 as depicted in the application materials and meeting the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg. Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second.
And a second? Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend to rezone. Approved. This time we have a preliminary plat, item 17, to consider a preliminary plat for Medora Meadows, generally described in the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting. Please feel free to come forward.
Thank you. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying. Hopefully Tim gave you a good idea of what their plan is for the site here. As far as the plat goes, we're breaking this down into 3 separate lots. At the south side, we'll have 2 of the community commercial lots with 15th Street dividing them, and the owner will be providing you with 15th Street. He'll be paving that to city standards. To the north, we have Lot 1, and that will be the residential development. There are 3 areas of dedicated right-of-way. We have dedicated 75 feet on the east side of this for States Avenue. To the north, we have dedicated 33 feet to match up with S&B subdivisions, 33 feet for 19th Street West. And as I stated, 15th Street, we have an 80-foot right-of-way to match the right-of-way to the east. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Shank at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add the 3 conditions. I haven't had a chance to get into discussion with the applicant with respect to that. I don't think any of these are anything that's outstanding. My first condition with respect to that would be all road configurations and access points via State Avenue and 15th Street extension shall be approved by the city engineer. I know they're meeting with them tomorrow, and we could finalize where those exactly will be at. 15th Street shall be paved prior to a certificate of occupancy for any building utilizing 15th Street as access. That might be a discussion we need to have further before we make that. Based upon earlier plats that we have that are outside of the city, we were saying that we wanted to have the road paved before a final plat or for any building permit issuance. So I think that a condition should be revised to require them to pave it before any building permit are issued. And then if 19th Street is proposed to have access for this development, the road should be paved as well. And then the third condition, prior to final plat approval, the developer shall provide evidence to the city planner that Lot 1, Block 2, which is the lot to the south of the extension of 15th Street, is a buildable lot. There are 2 existing easements situated throughout the lot, and they need to relocate those easements or be granted the ability to build over those easements, but they get approved that that's a buildable lot. Otherwise, the lot should be designated as Tract 1 and noted as the plat is undeveloped or unbuildable. Because the way that it's configured, if they can't get access to build over those easements, then they have no setback ability because those easements go right through the center of Lot 1.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg?
just looking at that offset of that trail going up to the water tower, even if they do get permission to build over them or in that area, is there an issue with how that new dedicated street will line up to get up to the water tower, which would be probably to the west? Is there going to be issues?
We had looked at that, and we feel that basically, probably the way that's going to work out is 15th Street would extend on, and then it would extend westerly to a certain portion, and then curve up northerly, and then from that point, somewhere along there, we would negotiate with the developer to the west to provide access to that water tower, the existing one. It makes no sense if 15th Street would continue on. We would just negotiate that access road with the property owner to the west whenever that time comes forward.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments or questions? This time we'll close public portion of this, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kolosh.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for Medora Meadows subdivision as depicted in the meeting materials, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health and safety and welfare, along with the 3 conditions that Mr. Curtan has put on.
Thank you. There's been a motion to recommend. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Krieg. Further discussion? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend. Thank you very much. Item 18 on the agenda is a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for the Gerber's addition generally described in the northwest quarter of Section 7, Township 139 North, Range 95 West. I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Again, Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying, representing the owner of Gerber's subdivision. They're looking at subdividing this area into 3 separate lots. This is along Energy Center out on the southeast side of town. 2 of the owners are planning on building storage units on their lots, Lot 1 and 2. And Lot 3 is planned to be a hydraulic shop. Dedicating 40 feet of right-of-way along the Energy Drive. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Any
Mr.
questions
Chairman,
at this time? Mr.
Yes,
Elkins?
we're going to request an 80-foot right-of-way in the county. This is really in the county, so,
40 foot from center line, sorry.
okay,
Yeah, our half would be 40 feet along Energy Drive.
okay. Then I was looking at this wrong. It looked like 40 feet, and I thought, holy cow.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Schenk, I'm having a hard time reading this. It looks like there are some other easements of some kind in there. Are those road easements?
Along Energy Drive, or?
Yes, well, yeah, it's labeled Villard Street. I think it should be Energy Drive,
Energy,
probably,
yeah.
huh?
Yeah, east, I'm not sure what the exact name, it's either East Villard or Energy Drive, one of the 2. I've seen both, Energy Drive. Okay.
I'm seeing something about a surface easement. Do you know what that is?
That was shown from the original, it must have been when the original road was built. There was a surface easement for that road that had showed up. That's an existing easement that's already in place.
Any other questions or comments?
I can't even read it. Well, along in here, would we want more? I wonder if we don't want 120. Maybe we'll require 120 units too. I know that our policy is clear. 80 feet. Any thoughts on that one? That's in
Let them figure out if they have a question here or not. But, Mr. Soren, you familiar with that road as far as the East Villard or Energy Drive? Is that width in order?
Well, currently Energy Drive, that is, 80-foot is the right-of-way width we have all along that road. So I would see this being appropriate to continue that right-of-way width. If you're asking if I know what the easements are, I don't.
Okay.
There, in our research, there was I believe it was a 33-foot right-of-way easement along the road, and there was also I believe it was 60-foot surface easement, and that was an existing easement, and that's what is shown on this plat here. I'm not sure what it was for, or...
Mr. Chairman, I have one concern, and I would really like you to, Andrew, to meet with Al Heiser
Okay.
and see if that right-of-way width is sufficient,
Okay.
okay?
Yep. Absolutely.
Any other questions? Any comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shank. This time I'd ask if there's anyone who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat, please feel free to come forward. Being none, anyone from the commission wish to make comment, further comment? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I will ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for Gerber's Addition as depicted in the application materials, meeting all the requirements of Dickens Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, with the condition that the final right-of-way width be in accordance with the approval of the county commissioner and county road superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
And I'll
Mr.
second
Elkins.
that.
And a second by Mr. Elkins. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 19, we have a special use permit, to consider a special use permit for a duplex in the R1 zoning district. The property is described as a lot 1 through 5, Block 1, and lot 1 through 5, Block 2 of the Painted Canyons Estate in Section 2, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. And I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward. Go ahead.
Diane's passing out the plans for the duplexes that we propose to build.
Okay, and your name?
I'm sorry, TJ Washburn, Winchester Homes, ND.
Okay.
We are a new company trying to build single-family homes in Dickinson.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, when we wrote the contract, there was our intent to build the duplexes on these lots. And with, I guess there was some language in the ordinance that the developers and us, we had a misunderstanding what could be built. I think something in the ordinance said you could build a single-family attached property, and that's what the developers were going off of, where we could build the attached housing. And it's been set up with the 2 sewers, 2 water lines to accommodate the duplexes.
Anyone have any comments or questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
What kind
Mr.
of time
Elkins.
frame are you looking at here from start to completion of this project?
Of the construction,
Right.
probably 120 days.
Well, when do you plan on starting this project?
as soon as, if we would granted the special use permit, as soon as we can. We've already submitted the permits originally and then didn't know we had to get the permit, so we're waiting on this to get started.
Any other comments or questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Toots.
TJ, are all the properties going to face east?
Yes.
Now, you're just showing a small portion that you want to put these on, actually, a total of 10 lots.
Yeah, there's 5 lots in each section.
Right. And I'm corrected that in Block 2, Lot 1 through 5 is going to involve a cul-de-sac?
No.
He's just going to put, no, you're right here. We're not right there.
Okay.
We're right here.
Okay, thank you. Something's on here that I guess I shouldn't even pay attention to. But, okay. No cul-de-sacs. That's good. Thank you. Okay. Okay.
It should be 2 blocks, lots 1 through 5, block 1, and then,
They're all half-acre lots. I'm the developer, or one of the developers on it. You guys see
Yeah, I
them?
apologize. I was looking at a Block 1 and a Block 2 of another map.
Okay.
So, thank you very much. Any other questions? Any other comments? Thank you very much.
okay, thanks.
At this time, we'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this special use permit. Please feel free to come forward.
My name is Tom Warner. I live directly across the street from this proposed area, and I would prefer to see it stay single-family homes, if possible.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
This time, is there anyone else in the public who would like to make comment? Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? If being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a comment from Mr. Catan. What he feels about this?
With respect to that, I have, differing opinions to that. Their error is not one that precipitates you to make a decision to accommodate them. It's pretty clear in the zoning code that an attached single-family is attached single-family. It's not a duplex. They have provided renderings for you. I guess the question to me would be, they're changing the density for that area. People have bought in with the anticipation there's going to be single-family lots, not duplex lots, and now they're doubling the density. You need to factor all those in as part of your deliberation. I don't see anywhere in their covenants that they state that as being duplexes. It was sold as single-family, so you've got to factor that in. Is it compatible with the surrounding zoning district? That being said, they have provided renderings that show the 2 duplex units. You have the one gentleman, Mr. Warner, I believe. He had spoken to me yesterday, and with these renderings, I'm wondering if that changes his mind. I know he was talking about it yesterday, and he was wondering what these would look like, or what the appearance would be. And I would like to ask him up and see if this at all changes his opinion with respect to that, and then you could factor that in with your final deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Mr. Warner, have you had a chance to see these or not? Okay, that would be, we would appreciate that if you don't mind looking at this.
I guess by the looks of them, I really don't have any objections to speak of for say now. I was picturing something totally different, my definition of a duplex, and something else, you know. But this looks more like what we would call a twin home, I'm assuming. And I guess they look pretty nice. I was more concerned about an apartment type thing where there'd probably be, you know, a bunch of vehicles and you name it all over the street and property out there, you know. And being my home, well, I guess I only have 1 acre out there, but my home would be directly across the street, and, you know, I would see it without a doubt from where I live, anywhere in my yard.
Well, I think with your concerns in that it is a special use permit,
That's correct.
we can attach requirements of the way they're going to look.
Well, you know, and I just assumed being everything in that Painted Canyon subdivision was zoned R1,
Yes, it will.
that, you know, this would stay R1. All of a sudden, we have one little section of 5 acres, basically 10 half-acre lots that all face to the east, is all of a sudden going to be duplexes or twin homes or whatever. I guess I would still prefer to see single-family residences living there, you know what I'm saying, or a single-family home.
I understand. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking your time.
Do you need this back? Okay, thanks.
Hello. I'm Corey Holler, one of the developers. Actually, the Painted Canyon Estates was a separate, I mean, it was not even, we did it together, but there were separate divisions. Those were always planned as twin homes, and we thought single-family attached were considered twin homes. If you read the definition, Ed Corton, right, Ed? We've talked to you many times on the definition, how it, I don't know if you have the definition of a single-family, you know, or single-family attached. We had, that's why we were always planning on those to be twin homes. We had water and sewer stubbed in for them. So really, those were always designed for something else besides R1. Painted Canyon was a development, and Painted Canyon Estates was a development. They were both separate, even though we did them at the same time, just because of what's going on around here, but so you guys know. So they were actually separate. The funding from the city came separate for the estates. Remember right, is that right, Shirley?
There were development impact fees that were associated with that, and at that time, it was not expected to be twin homes through that process. As I recall, there was a lot of controversy about that with the neighboring properties, and it was said that it was going to be a transition, larger lot, single-family homes transitioning into a higher density, single-family, you know,
Twin homes were
because
talked
of
about back then, but,
the size of them, but that's how I recalled that, but.
either way, but that's what we had planned for, so. I mean, they're just two separate developments, just so you guys know, so. Like, it's all I had, so.
Thank you very much. It does, yeah. 2 blocks, 10 lots, yep. Any other comments or questions? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I'll move City of Dickinson, excuse me, Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezone from CC to R2, I'm sorry, R1, I'm on the wrong item.
You're okay. We're going to do a special use on the R1 part.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Recommend approval of the special use permit for duplexes as depicted in the meeting materials, meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second that.
Would you consider adding to that, being it is a special use permit, that certain stipulations and the materials look, the visual of those be satisfactory to the city engineer and planner on this special use permit?
Sure, I don't know how to do that, sure, but
Mr. Corton?
If you prefer, Mr. Jackson, I could throw you a line and give you an idea if you like.
go for it.
You can just recommend approval based upon that, and that the attached renderings, the two renderings, that the duplexes have to be in significant, substantial conformance with the two attached renderings.
That's exactly what I intended.
Thank you.
Could I just add 2 words? The covenants do clearly identify the amount of stone and brick and type of materials that the structures are to be composed of.
That's very fine. At this point in time, the city's requirements are going to override those covenants. No, but our requirements may override something higher than they want. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just by way
Yes,
of
Mr.
discussion, I too remember the original conversation talking about 10 more upscale homes, and I don't remember anything about duplexes originally. Having said that, these lots are large lots. I think they're 120, 125 feet wide. They could be replatted to smaller lots, and you'd end up with the same density. The project looks nice, you know, the structures that are planned looks nice, and I think it'll fit well with the neighborhood.
That's an extremely good viewpoint to look at it. It could be worse than you're going to get without changing anything. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, recommended. Thank you very much. Last item, we have, second to last item, we have number 20, a rezone petition. To consider a rezone petition from CC to R2 for property described as a vacated portion of 2nd Street Northwest and a part of Lot 1, Block 2 of the KDIX Tower Edition, also refers to as Lamont's. So at this time, we'll ask the party presenting.
John Lowry with Lowry Engineering here again on behalf of the owners, Lamont Companies. And the existing zoning on this piece of property is community commercial, and in order to keep in kind of as a transition piece, if you will, from the R1 residential directly to the east of this property, we would ask that the Planning Commission rezone to for the twin homes, and from CC to, I believe it's R3, correct, Ed?
R2.
R2, excuse me, to R2. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. One thing to add quickly, it's the intention of the owner to develop these lots with a twin home, upscale, single, individual entrance residential construction, so.
Okay. Probably a pretty good idea, and this one here refers to item 7 we talked about earlier about finishing a road also through the property going, Sims must be completed.
Yes, I understand.
And I would like to see that any intention of any approval or even thinking about a regional detention pond on the east side of this property, that should not even be depicted, because that's not there. It hasn't been approved. It hasn't been really thought about. I think that should be removed from this drawing.
Okay, a detention pond.
On the depiction I have, handout I have, there's a detention pond penciled in there.
Along the east side of the twin
Right.
homes. Okay.
Okay, that should not even be inferred that that's being considered at this time. And that, I believe, is there a correction there at First Avenue West as listed is really First Avenue
East.
East?
Yep, understood from around there.
Okay?
Yep. So your specific issue is with putting the detention pond to the rear yard of those homes?
My issue with the detention pond is it's going to be solely up to whatever can satisfy city engineering and the
Sure.
public that
Okay.
surrounds this place.
Okay. So you don't necessarily have a
It
problem
shouldn't be
with that?
depicted on there at all.
Gotcha.
No, we don't know where it's going to be or whatever, and it shouldn't be inferred that it's going to be there.
Yeah, I'll get that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Kovai?
Just one other comment. If we do go ahead and rezone this, this will change the Parks and Rec portion. Before it was, commercial, now it will go to R3 or to R2.
R2.
So there will be a difference in payment there of, I don't know what that figure is, but
Sure. And we have been in discussions with the park board director and understand that that needs to be negotiated or agreed to. And we're in agreement with the payment in lieu, just finalizing the amount.
okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
my only comment is that I'd be interested in what staff says, but I think this is a good change. It provides a much nicer transition from that existing residential area into what'll probably be some commercial. So I think it's good.
I think so too. And I guess we can't talk about what else might come down the road, but this is strictly this portion of it from Lot 12 to the east of this down to the middle half of Lot 6. And at this time, that's all you're asking for. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Thank you. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this, please come forward.
Roger A. Johnson. I'm in Houston Second Edition, Lot 2. And I was just wondering, I could speak to John, I guess, also, but if they're going to replot this, which is wonderful, and I believe that it's a good move going to R2, being it's going to be in our backyards. The replot will stop at Lot 6 and then go north through 12. Just wondering why they would not go all the way to 14th and go with the R2. As Mr. Jackson has said, the transitional would be so much better for all of us that our backyard is to commercial. And we do not know what type of a commercial location will be on there as far as an office or another motel or whatever. Speaking of the retention pond, there is a retention pond north of the Hampton Inn right now, which most of that is caved in due to the large water coming down there. This last rain, the 3/4 of an inch, it was unbelievable. And it comes from quite a ways up north. My request would be to go all the way to 14th with R2, including Lot 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that would be my main request.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Johnson. And if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make comment on this, please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment? I'll make a comment that we can only actually address this issue at this point in time to satisfy the questions that were asked about it and why we aren't going down to 14th. We weren't asked to look at that at this point in time, and I think there's difficulties with some of that property for the developer right now. The retention pond, I've talked to Mr. Soren, I've talked to our city engineer about the retention pond that was referred to behind the motel, and that the city engineering is working on the water and the runoff plan for this whole area. So if you'd like to make comment, I'd sure like to hear it again.
Well, I would just like to point out, earlier with the replat of this area, that was one of the stipulations we talked about, was the stormwater plan and revising that for the new development that's being put in front of us. As far as the Hampton Inn, which is currently using the failing stormwater pond that's in place right now, that's the other side of the issue that we're working on and trying to get the whole development working together to make sure we're handling stormwater appropriately for all of it. So that's why we did require that stipulation on the replat.
Thank you, Mr. Soren.
If I can as well.
Sure.
I've been brought in recently. I was part of the design of the Hampton Inn and some of this up front, and not part of the construction. And I've been brought back in to work on Sims and 16th, as well as proposed improvements within the subdivision. And we talked with Nathan and back during this meeting, and we're beginning to aggressively pursue. It's really a completion of the construction of the Candlewood and that detention pond that it was in bad shape. They've done some shaping up on it, even as late as this last weekend since the rainfalls. And they're continuing to complete the construction to be consistent with the permitted set of documents that were done through the city. So we are taking action on that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments from the commission? This time we'll close public portion of this. And Mr. Curtin, I would like to hear a recommendation from you on this.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the item in front of us, I'm in favor of that. I'm thinking it makes sense to reduce the intensity of the land use adjacent to a residential district. I would let the applicant know that if they wanted to rezone to on Lot 2, Block 2, to have that as R2 as well, that I would be in favor of that, but that's not on the agenda item that we have here. We have not forcibly rezoned or downzoned properties yet. And someday we may look at certain properties that don't make sense and give them proper notification and look at it and downzone it accordingly if it's, if there's overriding concerns. But at this point, that's not on the agenda item. But I would be in favor of it with respect to the prior applicant's request. But other than that, this makes sense to me. They're going to have to meet all the development regulations just as much as Hampton Inn is. And we are, just for your information, we are withholding the certificate of occupancy on Hampton until they build the road, they get the stormwater put in, and they meet all applicable health and safety standards. We will not allow that to happen. And we have reiterated that several times with them, and I'll do it again today. So,
thank you, Mr. Curtin, for that recommendation. At this point in time, I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkins.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezone from CC to R2 as depicted in the application materials as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Krieg. Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we have item number 20, which is 21st item added to the agenda, but our 20th item we'll discuss. If Mr. Jackson would care to make some comment, we would love to hear some comment on some, I think we could call it dezoning.
Just briefly, just to maybe bring to this board some of the discussions that have been taking place. We have a number of subdivisions in the community that have been platted for some time, they've been rezoned for some time, and sitting idle. And I think we all recognize some of those. We've discussed a couple of them today, I think. And there has been some discussion, and in the future, maybe the city needs to look at whether it's a reverse zoning or a downgrading of the zoning, or, you know, bringing that zoning back to its original zoning for developments that aren't progressing. I think we have to be cautious about that. I think we have to, you know, really be deliberate in any of those kinds of actions. But I think we have to have it in our toolbox, if you will, to try to move development along the way we think it should be. It doesn't do us any good as a city, and it doesn't help the rent prices in our city when we have development sitting for 2 and 3 years with no activity. So my intention today was just to bring it up and get it in front of this board. I expect we'll talk more about it. Again, I think we have to be very careful with it. But I do think it's something we should look at in the coming months.
I think you're correct, and I think it was evident today that we addressed that with some of the time limitations on the PUDs and some of the the things that were not recommended today because we did not feel it would be developed. And it would be another property sitting there that no action was taking place on, or nothing to fulfill or warrant the city for taking an expense or the county. I appreciate the comment. Any other comments? This time I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. A motion to adjourn, is there a second? Second. All those